coming to hear our guest speaker. I've already seen his talk because we chat about this kind of thing with our guest speakers, and so I've already seen some very interesting things that he's going to be talking about, and we had a good discussion at lunch. Brian DeSanti is a FIEA alum from Cohort 5, which seems like so long ago, right?
Yeah.
At this point. Even though it wasn't that long ago. For himself in being the executive producer and the project manager on a number of different projects in the last several years for Kabam, which is an extremely successful developer, mainly in San Francisco, but multiple studios as well for Kabam. And we chatted with each other about doing something in the free-to-play space and trying to help find and discuss what the best strategies were in that realm. And so he's done a study of that, and here are his thoughts. So it'll definitely be very enlightening to hear what he has to say, given his expertise in this realm as well. And it'll be fun for you to see some of the cool projects he's been working on and some of the cool licenses, like Marvel and Star Wars, that he's been working with at Kabam. So please join me in welcoming Brian DeSanti.
Hey everyone. So as Ron said, my name is Brian DeSanti. I am a senior director of product management at Kabam, and I'm also the executive producer of one of the games we just released, Star Wars Uprising. And since I left FIEA, I have worked exclusively on free-to-play games, and so every time I've come back and kind of talked to people here at FIEA, I always want to just kind of give my opinions on the free-to-play space. So love free-to-play, a lot of people hate free-to-play, and there's just a lot of great things here to learn and to know about. So everything here in this presentation is my opinion, so you can agree with some of it, you can disagree with some of it. Hopefully that'll spark some questions and comments at the end, but let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first thing, really quickly, that I wanted to talk about were the characteristics of free-to-play, just sort of make sure that we're all on the same page. So free-to-play are games that are free to download, free to install. They have alternative means of generating revenue. So all games, whether they're pay-to-play, free-to-play, they need to make money to succeed. So free-to-play, as opposed to having a $60 or $50, $40 price tag up front, they use alternative means of generating revenue. That can be ads, that can be microtransactions, or it could be content packs or DLC. And in recent years, even some pay-to-play products have used some of these methods for generating additional revenue. And really, the purpose of not putting the price tag up front is for accessibility. So by putting the price tag, even in the mobile space, putting a $1.99 price tag on your app at the beginning means you're going to be getting 80% less users coming into your game. And so by starting the game out as free, it just gets a lot more people in. It makes the game a lot more accessible to your audience. And really the important thing about free-to-play is that it's one of the models for games as a service. And when people talk about free-to-play, oftentimes they counter it to sort of box products or pay-to-play products, especially in the mobile space. And the important thing to understand is that free-to-play works really well when it's sort of in the games as a service space, which really means that the two types of ways that you can really set up your game with a business model to continue supporting it for years and years to come would be either subscription model, which you can see in a lot of MMORPGs on PC, or the free-to-play model. So instead of offering a price point up front and then a subscription fee every month, the game is free to download, free to install, and then the users can pay what they want, anywhere from $0 to any amount of money, as they're playing the game. And this is really an important distinction because one of the strengths of free-to-play, along with the subscription model, is that it allows the game team to continue working on the product well after it's released. So for example, Star Wars Uprising, the project that I'm leading right now, it launched September 9th. And right now, the team size is larger than it was at any point during development, which is sort of the exact opposite of a boxed product. So we're going to continue to support the game, continuing adding features, content, things like that for the next 3 to 5 years. And if we just had a single price point up front, we wouldn't be able to do that, and we didn't want to lean on the subscription model. So really looking at kind of the origins of free-to-play, this is really where it started. So it started in Asia. It started in internet PC cafes. So what you had was, particularly in South Korea and China, you had people who didn't necessarily own their own personal computer. They went to internet cafes where they could pay, or basically a subscription to use the computer, an hourly fee to play games on that computer. And whatever games were already set up there were games that you could play. So these games were free for users to create accounts. I could hop on, pay the internet cafe an hourly fee, and play any of the games that they had available. And then the computers inside these cafes oftentimes acted as shelf space. If your game wasn't on any of the internet cafe PCs, no one was going to be playing it. So it really helped to have a quality product that these cafes wanted to have their customers playing, and then really users could then pay anything they wanted to while playing the game. They could pay nothing and just spend the money on the hourly fees at the internet cafe, or they could spend additional amounts of money inside the game, either to speed up progression, for vanity purposes, for power, really for whatever they wanted, depending on the game. And really, in the early to mid 2000s, Asian MMOs that were free to play started making their way over into the West. So the first two games I ever played that were free to play, the first one was MapleStory. It was a side-scrolling MMORPG where you could outfit your cute little character in armor, weapons, in costumes, and you could just run around the world killing monsters, chatting with players, and the game was free. And I thought that was weird. I had never played a free-to-play game before. I didn't really understand how they could not charge a price up front. And so I was really excited. Being a poor college student, I got to play MapleStory for free, didn't spend any money. In 2006, I played Gunbound, which is really an online Worms-style game. You kind of outfit your character with weapons, and then you shoot each other. It was sort of a Worms-style arena game. And these were some of the really earliest Asian MMOs that launched in the US that were fairly successful. MapleStory, one of the most successful early free-to-play games that came out in America. And as these games started gaining popularity, what you found was that there were Western MMO developers that decided to take the plunge into free-to-play. Unfortunately, the first few that did it only sort of did it, and they, in a lot of ways, leveraged sort of the worst aspects of free-to-play. So what you ended up having were these companies that took products that used to be subscription. So you had Dungeons & Dragons Online, Lord of the Rings Online, both by Turbine, and they decided that as their subscription numbers were dwindling, they weren't as successful as games like World of Warcraft. They were going to convert their games to free-to-play. And in a lot of ways, this was US gamers' first kind of introduction to free-to-play. And what these companies did was they really gave you a capped version of the game. Like, sure, you could continue paying a subscription if you want the good experience, or you could get the very minimal experience. One character, you're leveling a lot more slowly. There are certain aspects of the game you couldn't access. And so really it was a kind of undercut experience that basically made it feel like if you were playing the game for free, you were not as important. You were not as important, especially not as meaningful to the developer as the users that continued to want to pay the subscription. And I think in a lot of ways, this, along with a lot of other games that maybe used some shadier free-to-play practices, put a lot of bad taste in gamers' mouths for free-to-play. But then you had one company in particular, Riot Games, that released League of Legends. And League of Legends launched in 2009. I'm assuming everyone here has played League of Legends. If you haven't, you need to, at least to understand how they use free-to-play. The whole game is free. It truly uses all the great things that come with a free-to-play product. So it's completely free-to-play. There are no aspects of the game that are locked behind paywalls or subscriptions, or you need to get 10 friends to play the game in order to keep playing. You can do whatever you want in the game for free. And really there's two ways to spend money, or there's two things you can spend money on. So the first thing is vanity. And so this is actually the only aspect of the game that is pay only, and that is just costumes and vanity. So you have a hero like Nocturne. You don't like the way he looks? Well, you can make him blue. You can put a sheet over his head, or you can just completely change his costume altogether. So that's the first way That's the first way they make money, is through vanity. And the second way is through time, either time for progression. So if you want to spend money on boosts, you can increase your soft currency gain. So whenever you play the game, you earn influence points. Those influence points then allow you to buy other things in the game. You can spend money to increase your influence point gain, or you can increase your XP gain if you just want to get to level 30 faster. Maybe this is your second account. You've already done the experience the free way, and you just want to spend a couple dollars to get there a lot faster, so you have 2 level 30 accounts. You can do that. The other thing you can spend money on is time to power. And so this is one that has a lot of controversy in free-to-play, in that being able to spend money to gain power. And the way League of Legends does it is I think the right way. So in the game, you earn influence points. You play the game for free. You're earning these points. You then can buy heroes. Or you can spend money and buy these heroes faster. At the end of the day, though, because their game uses matchmaking, when you're paired with the 4 other people on your team and the 5 people that you're against, it doesn't matter if the person that you're playing with has been playing the game for a day and bought all these heroes, or if they've been playing for 3 years and got these heroes for free. It doesn't influence your experience. It doesn't influence their experience. And since this is a game that doesn't really have an end, it's just sort of an open-ended arena-style game, it ultimately doesn't matter how old your account is, and it doesn't matter how much money you've spent. You're not necessarily any better or worse off than the person next to you. And they may have spent $2,000, maybe they spent $5, maybe they spent nothing. And so while this was also going on, you had the rise of social games, the rise of web games, largely because of Facebook. So everyone was on Facebook, everyone's lives were being devoured by Facebook, and developers came along and said, well, since you're already on Facebook 24/7 anyways, why not play some games? So you have games like Candy Crush, you have games like Farmville, and then you had, towards the later end of kind of Facebook games, you had games like Kingdoms of Camelot, which was developed by Kabam, that was a little bit more hardcore. It was a very, very, very light kind of empire building game. And these types of games, you started to see the same types of mistakes that companies made early on in sort of PC free-to-play games. In a lot of ways, it sort of reset the learnings, reset the audience, reset the developers. And as they were growing, as they were getting more mature, their growth and their evolution was stunted by a pretty major shift that happened pretty quickly. And if you don't know what that is, you probably all have them in your pockets, and that would be smartphones. So right as in the same way that PC games were starting to evolve, and you had originally companies like Turbine that were using free-to-play as a way to just get people in the door, but really wanted them to spend money and subscribe to their service. You kind of had that transition to games like League of Legends that were really using free-to-play the best way they could. You sort of had a reset with social games, and then before they could really mature and grow, you had another reset with mobile development. So you had games coming out on iOS, you had games coming out on Android, and they were doing good things, bad things. They were really trying anything they could. And at Kabam, what we talk about is sort of this phase 1 of mobile free-to-play development. This is largely what I want to talk about, is sort of the kind of evolution of the player base, evolution of development, using mobile as the example, since it is something that if people in here aren't playing mobile games, there's a lot of people that do. I would encourage you to play mobile games just to sort of see this evolution that maybe happened over a decade in the PC space. It's happening over the course of just a couple years on mobile. It's sort of sped up. And what ended up happening was developers had no idea what players wanted, and so there ended up being sort of these two camps. There was a camp of developers that sort of approached it like it was any sort of console game, like it was any sort of boxed product. So their focus was on fidelity, immersion, sort of back-of-the-box features that they could advertise. They wanted to really try to drive quality by, in the same ways you would drive a box product or a console product by like a Metacritic score. You look at a game like Vainglory. It looks great, it plays great, but it's not nearly as successful as other games. And it was, in a lot of ways, the company that was working on Vainglory was really trying to develop the game as if it was a game on PC, as if it was a game that was on PS4, Xbox One. And then you had this other camp of users, and Kabam was in this camp, as were a lot of other really successful free-to-play companies like Supercell, Machine Zone, and that they were very honest. We had no idea what players wanted. So really, we tried anything. We would try any type of monetization strategy, any type of gameplay, any type of genre. And what you ended up having was, in the mobile space, it created all these different types of ways of engaging users. You had games like Dragon Veil that were pet simulation. So it was really an evolution of sort of like a Tamagotchi game. And you could spend money on vanity items for your dragon. You could buy better food. You could do things to just sort of speed up your experience. You had empire building games. So Kabam, we took all of our games that were successful on the web and we ported them to mobile. We updated the interface to be more mobile friendly, but in a lot of ways we were trying the same things that we were trying in the web space. You had Asian companies that were well ahead of the curve, and they were trying more sophisticated things like puzzle RPGs like Puzzle and Dragons, where you could spend money to collect a team of heroes and use them to compete in sort of a puzzle quest style game. You had Supercell was working on, Supercell had been around for, I don't know, 10 plus years. They had been slowly evolving their games. They had been wildly unsuccessful on Facebook. They sort of took their tower defense style game, retuned a lot of things, put it back out on mobile, and they released Clash of Clans, which was wildly successful. You had companies like King that created Candy Crush. So theirs was sort of an arcade style monetization. They gave you lives, and really every time you failed, took a life away. And then, but if you were very successful, you could go 10, 20, 30, 50 levels in a single play session before you ran out of lives. And then we had other games like Injustice, Mortal Kombat, Marvel Contest of Champions that wanted to try to introduce more of a Twitch experience into the mobile space with sort of a kind of an action, very light fighting game. But we had no idea. I mean, Kabam had no idea what players wanted, had no idea it was going to work, so Kabam tried anything. We had racing, we had empire building, we had RPGs, we had action games. And really what we saw was these types of games that really had more of a data approach. Because we were very aware that we had no idea what was going to work, focused very much on testing inside of our games, analyzing the results, iterating on them either within the same product or in a new product, and then sort of repeating that process. But what we ended up finding was a lot of companies, Kabam included, got too focused on data in the early days. And really what ended up happening was where the console camp was solely focused on Metacritic score, we had the data camp that was solely focused on data. And if you introduce something new to the game and it increases the metrics in the game, if the number of players that return after they install the game was 30%, you make a change to the game and now it's 35%, well, now your game must be better, right? I mean, that was sort of the thinking. If you could increase the amount of money that the average player spent from it being $1 to $1.50, your game was better. But what ended up happening was these systems were being put in place to really drive, if you've heard it, sort of really drive whale spending or VIP spending, in that you still had 99.9% of users that weren't spending money, and then you had this 0.1% of users that were spending an outsized amount of money, thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was, by just looking at data, it was clouding the results in that a lot of companies thought they were making better and better games, when really all they were doing was introducing systems that allowed people to spend more and more money, thus making the experience worse for most of the players. And ultimately what happened was, in sort of this phase one, as we're defining it, it was very clear that the data approach won. If you look at all the games in top grossing, in top downloaded, these were companies and games that continued iterating on themselves. They didn't necessarily have the greatest fidelity, the greatest game mechanics. You look at so the top grossing game in 2012 was one of Kabam's titles, Kingdoms of Camelot: Battle for the North. And while it had a lot of great things going for it, there were a lot of things that weren't so great. It was pretty dry gameplay. I don't know if anyone necessarily would call the game fun, but in a lot of these games, fun wasn't really a word you used. And really, this was something that Kabam sort of began to realize a number of years ago. And really, this is where, in sort of the evolution of where free-to-play is going, the Kabam hypothesis is that we're entering phase 2. And what you can see in any new medium, any new platform or business model is that as you transition from phase 1 to phase 2, there's a number of things that we begin to see. And whether it's, you can look at theater, which is thousands of years old, or cinema, players begin, or consumers begin to get more sophisticated, more mature. And so again, what we want to do is looking at where free-to-play started. If we look at Asia, if we look at games from Korea, games in China, games in Japan right now, we can see that they're well ahead of where we are in terms of free-to-play, because their players have continued to mature, and the developers have continued evolving to keep up with an advanced audience. So what we see now is we see things like improved fidelity. So whereas games before didn't necessarily care about graphics, now the way a game looks, it becomes just as important as how much money a user can spend in the game. We have improved gameplay depth and variety. Various types, in a lot of ways, these games are becoming more like full-fledged MMOs, in that a user comes in, maybe they only like the social aspects of the game. Well, there's a whole set of systems that a user could spend hundreds of hours just participating in the social aspects, or they just care about PvP, or they just care about PvE, or they just care about playing with their friends. And these games now have ways for users to engage with their product and really participate in the things that they wish to do, not just the things that developers want the users to do. We have digital engagement. So this is a game, Fantasy Westward Journey, and this is a real game screenshot. And the blue and green characters are players' names. And this is something that if we had released this, I don't think your average Candy Crush player would be like, yeah, I really want to play this game. But what we're seeing is that as players are getting more sophisticated in Asia, it's again, like I said, becoming a lot more like an MMO. If you were to jump to Warcraft and you look around and there's not a single other player in the game, a new user might get discouraged and be like, I don't know if this game is dead, I don't know where people are. Obviously, this is sort of an extreme example, but we have games now where you log in and you can deal with thousands or millions of other players. And the other important thing is that it's fun at all levels of spending. Picture, so I used a picture of Blade because it's interesting looking. I don't know what fun at all levels of spend looks like in a single screenshot. But that becomes very important in that the game needs to be fun if you want to spend $0 in the game, and the game needs to be fun if you want to spend $100, $1,000, however much money a user wants to spend. The game should still be fun for them, and it shouldn't feel like you have to spend that. It shouldn't be, oh, you can play the game up to a certain point and then either give us $1 or give us 3 friends, or lose three friends because you've just connected them to a game. We really want players to feel like there's value and that the games aren't tricking you into spending money. Again, in phase 2, what we're looking at is sort of this evolution of all these things that I just briefly mentioned: improved fidelity, gameplay, social engagements, reasons to come back and actually interact with other players. It's not just a game where you'll quickly hop in, it gets a quick buck from you, you uninstall it after 7 days and you forget about it. These are games that we want, especially in Kabam's games, we want players to be playing the games for years, 2+ years. For a lot of our games, we have people that have been in the game since 2009, and we want them to continue feeling like there are reasons to come back, whether it's for the social connections they've made, for the increased kind of either content or feature releases that we're doing, or just the fact that they're just still having fun in our online world. And then again, fun at all levels of spend. And so they're more mature. So everyone in this room, whether they think so or not, is substantially more sophisticated of a kind of movie viewer than people 30, 50 years ago. If we're watching a movie and there's people in a room, there's 3 people in a room, and they all start to exit, and then right before the last guy exits, kind of zooms in, he looks around, he grabs a screwdriver and puts it in his pocket, chances are as an audience we know someone's getting stabbed with a screwdriver. And it's just because it enough times that we know like they wouldn't be zooming in, they wouldn't be focusing on this guy grabbing a screwdriver if it wasn't important. And so in a lot of ways, this is what we're starting to see in free-to-play. People are starting to understand sort of the free-to-play mechanics that are good and the free-to-play mechanics that are bad. They're becoming picky. Plenty of products that use free-to-play for the good aspects, and there are certainly companies and games that use free-to-play for their negative aspects that a user can hop in, see the game first 10 minutes and be like, no, I've seen this before, I don't like this, I'm going to uninstall and I'll move on. Because, and there's people that don't, but there's now a large audience of people that do, that all they play are free-to-play games, or all they play are mobile games. So people who play free-to-play games, they see this in the top right corner, and they immediately understand, like, oh, that's an energy mechanic. That's some sort of system that when I hit 0, the game is going to either ask me for money, or it's going to tell me to log off and not play the game anymore. And while that may have been a perfectly acceptable way of generating revenue in the past, my hypothesis is that it's not going to be moving forward. There's plenty of other ways to allow the player to find value in spending money and playing the game without sort of forcing this arbitrary bolted-on system that says, no, you've had enough of the game for today, come back tomorrow. From Marvel, this is from one of our games, and even this game has only been out a couple of years, and we've quickly realized that there are several other ways, better ways of using, of delivering experiences to users. And players are not tolerant of clones. So if you go back and you look at Kabam's history, Kabam made quite a lot of success off of cloning their own products. We had Kingdoms of Camelot. We reskinned it, made The Hobbit. It was very successful. A lot of players were playing the game, a lot of revenue, a lot of downloads, a lot of installs. But that type of thing is not going to fly today. We're not looking. We've released Marvel. We've released Star Wars Uprising. Our strategy is not to take Star Wars Uprising and clone it to be something else, because we know that that's just not going to be a worthwhile investment. Players understand and are smart and are sophisticated enough to realize that's not how they should be spending their time, because there are enough quality products, even on mobile, on PC, on console, that they don't have to waste their time with clones. And players are rejecting obvious pay to win. So I think League of Legends is a great example in that I don't think when talking about free to play, when talking about League of Legends, the conversation doesn't immediately go to pay to win, even though in League of Legends you absolutely can pay for power, but it doesn't matter, because the same users that are paying for heroes that are maybe stronger than the heroes that are free that week are getting match made with people of their same skill level. It doesn't matter if you've spent money to get Nocturne, or if you've earned him for free, or if he's the free hero of the week, even if he happens to be one of the strongest junglers or one of the strongest AD carries in rotation at the moment. They've built a system whereby players can spend time in the game and draw real value. People can spend money and get real value. And really, it's up to the player to determine, do I want to spend time in the game? Do I want to spend money in the game? Do I want to spend both? And I can still have a great experience. And what we're seeing in mobile is that these types of strategies are now being employed. And really, time and money need to have value for the user. And so really, in this phase 2, what good looks like is, in my opinion, is a number of things. So as a developer, you have to love mobile and you have to love free-to-play. If you come in and you feel like there are no mobile games that are good, mobile games will never be good, and you hate free-to-play, guess what? You're not going to build a great mobile free-to-play product. It would be like working on a movie and never watching movies. And so this is why it's important to really play everything, because you never know what you're going to be working on, and you have to have, I think maybe an easy example is when I finished FIEA, I interviewed with EA Tiburon. The first question was, what type of sports do you follow? And I was like, none of them. And they're like, all right, great. And even though they said that wasn't important, like, it's obviously important that at Tiburon you have to love sports. You need to have a passion for the products you're working on. And I I didn't get offered a position at Tiburon, and I think that ended up being for the best because I was not going to be someone who loved working on Madden or NCAA at the time. And really, the same thing applies to mobile games, same thing applies to free-to-play games, is you have to love them, you have to understand them, you have to know why they're good, you have to know how they can be bad to avoid it. And the developers that do this are going to be the ones that are going to be coming out with great products. And the game needs to be mobile and free-to-play at heart. You can't just tack on free-to-play at the very end and try to make it work. You can't just tack on free-to-play to a single-player game and expect it to make a lot of money. There's been plenty of postmortems on sites like Gamasutra of companies that tried to do that, and they thought, oh, I'll just take the price tag off. I'll just throw in some things to spend money on. People will love that it's free to download, and then because they love the game, they'll just spend money. And while that works some of the times, if the game doesn't present real value to the user, if it feels tacked on in the second phase with these more sophisticated, more mature users, they're going to quickly realize that and either just not spend money or not play the game altogether. And really, all of the old crappy tricks that were employed, players are rejecting them, and really we just need to stop doing them. We need to. There is no reason why we need to put a paywall up that says, "Hey, give us $1 if you want to access these levels." There's no reason why we should lock aspects of the game behind money and say like, "Oh, well, you're a free user, so you get a shitty version of the game. But hey, once you spend money, you can join us over here in the exciting parts of the game." Developers need to offer like true value for the users. They need to understand that even if 1%, 0.5%, 5%, whatever it is, even if there's a small percentage of users that spend money, all of the users in the game need to have fun playing the game, need to understand or need to feel like they're getting a great experience and they're not being shafted for not spending money or feeling like that the game at every turn is just trying to make a quick buck off of them. Monetization really needs to be integrated into the core fun of the game. And like I said, I think in a lot of ways, League of Legends is a great example of this. Hearthstone is another one that sort of Magic the Gathering had been in a lot of ways the sort of free-to-play model before free-to-play was a thing. In that, yeah, without spending money, you're not really going to. You can acquire cards over periods of time. Maybe you get them from your friends, but really you're going to spend money, get packs of cards, and that's how you're going to get better and better stuff. And Hearthstone sort of employed this and said, look, we don't need to charge up front. We can just sell packs of cards like any collectible card game would, and integrate that into the fun of the game. There are free ways to get packs of cards. There's people who've spent nothing in Hearthstone and have plenty of decks that they can play with, or there's people that have spent thousands of dollars. And at a certain point, it doesn't matter if you've spent any money when you're playing against someone. If they beat you, they beat you. It doesn't matter if they spent more money or less money than you. And really, it needs to make sense for the game or the genre. You can't just, I think an example of this could be looking at, there are games that employ either blind boxes or gear or sort of power progressions like you would in an RPG. And if you try to tack that onto, say, like a racing game or a base building game, it doesn't always make sense. It has to, the monetization and the way you spend money really has to make sense for the game, for the genre that you're building. And then one thing that's really important that we've seen is that social engagement is key. The reasons why people stick around in your game is not because there's great things to spend money on. It's not because you introduce 5 new skins a week. It's because there's sort of the long-term social engagement. Either you make friends in the game that you're playing with, or there's friends that you have outside of the game that are playing the game with you. And sort of a couple examples of this, of sort of what good looks like, were things that we employed in Star Wars Uprising. So the first thing was we wanted to integrate a deeper social experience into the game. And so the first thing is cartels. Cartels are player guilds. That's not uncommon for MMOs to have player guilds in the game. It can be somewhat uncommon for mobile games or for free-to-play games to have a way to connect with users that aren't your Facebook friends, that aren't your friends that you were trying to give you lives or give you energy. But these are real kind of social connections that you could make, and you can join a cartel and interact with those players, gain benefits from them, play the game with them, And we also added 2 to 4 player multiplayer. So and this is something that is relatively uncommon for mobile free-to-play games, is that in the game, it's Star Wars Uprising is sort of a light action RPG, sort of a dungeon crawler experience in the Star Wars world. I can connect with 2 to 3 other people that I either know in the real world, or I know in the game, or just happen to be looking to run the same mission I am, connect with them, and we can run through the dungeon in a synchronous gameplay experience, which ends up being a lot of fun. You end up making a lot of friends that way, and it can be a way to curb difficulty. If I'm a user and I want to try to encounter some of the harder content, I can pair up with 2 or 3 other people, and guess what? If one of those people that comes along happens to be someone who's spent some money in the game and they're awesome and they can really add they can add advantages that I maybe don't have access to, either because I haven't earned it yet or because I haven't gotten that far in the game, and they have, like, that's great. It just, that user spending money can enrich my experience without making it feel like I have to spend money. And so that was sort of one of the key selling points for Star Wars Uprising, and it's been actually one of the biggest things that players have really enjoyed, is that in a lot of ways, as I guess derogatory it sounds, the feedback we get is that it feels like a real game. It feels like a game I can come into and actually play and have fun, play with my friends, and it feels like a real game, which I think is really what we're looking at for phase 2, is that we're getting to a point where it's not going to be like, oh, it's a good game for mobile, or oh, it's a good game for free to play. It's that it's actually a good game. It's a game that I would want to spend time playing and spend time in this game world. And the second thing that we did, as I kind of pointed out from previous Kabam games, was we removed energy. There was no reason for us to want to try to get money out of people by saying, like, oh, no, we know you really like the game, we know you really enjoy playing it, but you've had enough today. Come back tomorrow or give us some money. But the thing we did want to do was we do want there to be ways for people that want, in a lot of ways, the energy system allowed people who maybe didn't have time all of the time to play, but had bursts of time. They would play the game. They could spend money to refill their energy and keep playing and progressing through the game. We wanted to still allow people who maybe didn't have a ton of time all the time to play the game, a system in which they could invest and still get rewards. So what we did was we actually created a crew system. So in Star Wars, you never go alone. If you're Han Solo, you've got Chewie. We wanted to introduce a crew system. So you are a hero in the Star Wars universe. You are in the world post Return of the Jedi, and you don't go it alone. You collect other heroes that will play the game with you, and these are collectible NPCs that you get as you progress through the story. These are other characters you've interacted with. Maybe they're droids or astromechs, and you can send them on their own missions. And what this allowed was for people who did not have a lot of time to play the game, but wanted to instead invest money, they could spend money to acquire more crew members, because everyone in the game was getting these crew members as they progressed through the game, but you could get additional crew and send them on these missions. And basically, I'll take this guy, the reformed cultist, I'll send him on the profit skimming mission, and that way I can send a bunch of guys out. I can log in maybe for 2-3 minutes at a time, send a bunch of guys out, and then when I play the game next, I can come back and collect all the rewards. And as a person who would rather invest, I don't know, $5, $10 into the game as opposed to time, I can collect extra crew members, send them out on runs, and collect these rewards. But really, these rewards were the same types of things that users were getting in dungeons. There was no explicit advantage in that, except that a user, instead of investing time into the game, could invest money, or a user could do both and continue progressing. And so in a lot of ways, this worked out really well for us, because we have people in the game who play the game near 24/7. Because there's not an energy mechanic, it doesn't stop them, it doesn't force them to spend money, and so they're in the game playing all the time. And we have other people who don't have, like, I don't have 20 hours to put into Star Wars Uprising every day. I wish I did, but I don't. So I'm willing to spend a little bit of money, get a few extra crew members, and every day I'll check in, get my rewards, and not feel like I'm falling behind because I don't put in 10, 20 hours a day. And so really, to sort of recap, again, sort of in terms of free-to-play, and especially at Kabam, we're looking at sort of the Asian companies. We're looking at Asian games because they're continuing to lead the way. Free-to-play started there. Their users have been evolving and maturing well before the US players had even seen a free-to-play game. And so in a lot of ways, what they were doing 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, those things are slowly starting to make their way over here. And so what they're doing today are in a lot of ways what we think a more mature, more sophisticated audience is going to be looking for in the future. And in a lot of ways, the evolution of free-to-play is coming full circle. You look at kind of the earliest PC games that were coming over from Asia, MapleStory, Gunbound, those types of games were, they really drew on the social aspects of the games. You made friends in the game, there was chat, it was just as much fun to sit in the game and interact with other players as it was to play the games itself. And what we're seeing is that's because as smartphones get bigger and larger, it's easier to communicate with one another, it's easier to chat with players. What we're seeing is that these types of things are becoming more important. And because of tablets and because of larger smartphones, you can really add this depth of gameplay without it being a hindrance on a teeny tiny device. So we're adding gameplay depth back in. We're adding deep social engagement. And really, the players are smart and old tricks won't work. And I think in a lot of ways that's a great thing because it will require the developers in phase 2 to mature and really realize that, look, we should not be looking to try to just release a game, have a user come in, spend 5 to 10 days in the game, get $1 out of them, and then get them to quit. We really need the games that are most successful and the games that are going to continue being successful are ones that really understand that good really means no tricks, actually offering real value when users are spending money, having that be tied to the fun of the game, to the experience, having there be improved fidelity, improved gameplay, or in a lot of ways, real gameplay, and depth to that gameplay so that it's a user who spends 5 minutes in the game has fun, but then a user who spends an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in the game doesn't quickly get bored because the gameplay is shallow or uninteresting, and that the game is innately social. In a lot of ways, all of the kind of sort of the evolution of free-to-play especially on mobile, is becoming more and more that these games are becoming full-fledged MMOs, so that a user can come in and really do whatever they want and have a deep, rich, meaningful social experience. And so I guess that's it. So that's pretty much everything. If there are questions, I'd love to answer them. Yeah. Yep.
What are your thoughts on using ads as a way of getting revenue on free-to-play?
I think it's. I mean, I think it's all right. I think the companies that have done it the best are. I certainly think that ads can be bad. You can certainly drown your game in ads. But there was a game that released not too long ago called Stormcasters, and they used ads in a very interesting way in that it wasn't something that where ads were just constantly in your face, but every now and again, hey, would you like an extra life, or would you like, if you die, would you like to revive? You could watch this video. And I think video ads can be great because I'm always willing to watch a 30-second ad if it means I can generate, I can generate some hard currency for myself without spending money, and it rewards the developer. But I think, like anything, it has to be done in moderation. In that if you slap ads everywhere, it starts to look cheap, and especially in games that are really trying to immerse the player in a game world, like for Star Wars Uprising, we'll never consider ads because we want people to feel like they are in the Star Wars world. We don't want every other ad to be like, hey, go check out this game on Facebook. Hey, go download Yelp, and we'll give you go order flowers through us, and we'll give you some hard currency. That sort of pulls the user out of the experience. So I think as long as a developer is careful with it, it can be a powerful tool. Yeah. Yes.
Do you believe that free-to-play mechanics could easily be adapted to charitable donation type of thing?
Absolutely. I mean, we already see that now with certain companies. I think League of Legends does it, but I mean, World of Warcraft is certainly one of the companies that they've started. World of Warcraft has started leaning a little bit into free to play and subscription, and that they have things you can buy on top of it. And every now and again, they will put they'll put a pet in the shop, and they'll say like 100% of proceeds will go to Make-A-Wish Foundation. Kabam oftentimes will, either for the holidays or if there's some sort of tragedy in the world, either a natural disaster or something, we'll put something up that will give users, they can spend $5, $10, and it'll give them something in the game, and then 100% of the proceeds will go to either Red Cross or Make-A-Wish. And I think it's great because if it's something like a pet or something that can be easily built in the game, like it's not really costing the developer anything, and it can really go to a great cause. And so I think every company should do it at least some of the time. Yeah. Yep.
So you talked a lot about, you did a lot about like how to market power in certain ways that the players don't feel bad about it. And that kind of
Sure.
stuff. What do you see about, you use League of Legends a lot compared to like Dota that does purely vanity
Yeah.
monetization. Where do you see that going anywhere? How do you balance that? How do you use it correctly?
Sure. I think, they're both very valid strategies. I think it's just, I think in a lot of ways it can be, like League of Legends and Dota are interesting because the games are so similar and they went two different directions. I think that going the full vanity route can be risky because of the fact that there are going to be people, myself included, there are going to be people that want to potentially speed up their experience if they don't have a lot of time to play. So I play a ton of games. I don't have time to put 100 hours into each game, and I would be more than willing to support a developer and spend some money to speed up my time, as long as it's done right. Whereas you have for every company, for every success like Valve that did vanity only, there are hundreds of developers that have gone that route, and it hasn't been successful. I think it has to be. It's sort of a tricky balance because if the vanity options aren't compelling enough, then it is certainly possible to make your game too free. And as weird as it sounds for that to be a bad thing, at the end of the day, if your game's not making any money, you're not going to be able to support it. And so I think as long as Valve was obviously a large enough company that the draw of doing Dota has obviously brought a lot of things in, has brought a lot of people in, but they've actually done a lot of other ways to make money. You have things like the Compendium, where they take 70. It's interesting in that. Do you follow Dota at all?
Oh, way too much.
Okay. So then you're familiar with the Compendium, and they offer an item when their esports tournament is getting to the largest tournament of the year is the International. You can basically buy a program that gives you information about the players, gives you information about heroes, gives you unique rewards, and I think it's like $10, and you can spend money into it to level it up to give you additional rewards, and a percentage of that goes to the prize pool. And I think in the last International, Valve put in $1 million in the prize pool, and then the players put in $14 million to get the total prize pool. I think it was around $15 million, and that's awesome. They used this item to get that. Was that higher? 18. Okay, 18 when it ended. And that sounds awesome. They were doing that, but what you realize is that 25% of the proceeds went to the prize pool, which means the 17 million that went into the prize pool, that was only 25% of the money they earned. And so they made a lot of money on things other than vanity. And so I think even Valve has started to try to diversify the way they're spending, they're generating revenue. And they're not doing things through power. They're doing things through the success of esports, but they're trying other routes besides pure vanity as well. Yes,
I think
Ron.
part of what's coming out in this discussion, I think that's absolutely a great example of this idea is that different players have a different psychology,
Yep.
emotional reaction to different kinds of monetization business models and so forth. So it would seem to be the case that game developers have this difficult challenge whereby you're going to have players of these different mindsets and perspectives playing your game. Where for some players, they have no qualms at all about buying a vanity costume for their character, and that's a great spend of $5 for them.
Yep.
For other players are offended by that and would never do it, but have absolutely no problem with spending $5 to avoid 10 hours of gameplay that they don't have time in their life for.
Mm-hmm.
And then all other kinds of variants. How does a designer deal with a world in which they have this diverse set of players? They can't make all of them happy with any given model or feature. And
Sure.
How to offend some of them while catering to others. What do you do?
Well, so like I said, obviously Valve's route was to release all of their heroes for free, whereas Riot went a different route. And I think for Kabam specifically, we have always leaned towards letting the players kind of drive time or money into the game, or both. And so you do have players that get upset by the fact that they put 30 hours into the game, or a person put 10 hours into the game every day, let's say, or 5 hours into the game every day, and a person who is not playing the game as much but instead spending money can keep up with them. There's certainly people that are upset by that, and I think that's one of the great things about free-to-play is that because, especially for something like Star Wars Uprising, we didn't just ship the game and then move on to another product. We're continuing to work on the game. It will allow us to, we'll never get everything right. We'll probably get most things wrong the first time we try it. But it will allow us to take in player feedback and try to find the best balance. Maybe $5 for 10 hours is too much value for your money, and maybe we have to rebalance things or look to be more generous on the time side. And so I think as we continue to release content, release features, we can tune the experience to what our player base, to try to find a happy medium. We're never going to make everyone happy, but we can try to make the most people the least upset, I guess.
Do you think it's possible that we might see more aggressive attempts to deal with this problem, whereby some games might actually have somewhat of different modes of gameplay, where early on a player would make a decision about what kind of game experience they have when it comes to monetization, and then you let them have that, and you don't bother them with vanity items if that's not what they're into. They don't feel the weight of that in the game because they're in a different mode. There's certain aspects of it that are ignored. Is that even
It's certainly possible. We've certainly seen that if you look at individual players as they progress over years inside a game, what they'll spend money on or what they'll spend their time doing can radically change. And so I don't know if locking a player into that route forever is a good idea, but you could theoretically have a system that's set up to learn what the player is doing, what the player is either spending their time on or spending their money on, and sort of cater an experience specifically for them.
Yeah, it feels to me like that might be an interesting route to go, because if it's true that I never spend money on vanity items in particular, then those pop-ups don't
Sure.
come up to me. They're not doing anybody any favors.
Yep.
They annoy me, and they don't make any money for the developer.
Yeah.
But maybe I spend money in some other way, and that's how you're
Yeah.
trying to grab a player.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've developed on Star Wars, and actually in a lot of Kabam's products, is a rather robust like context and conditions based system that would allow for just that. To where if we're finding that all the user's ever doing is, let's say, buying a specific type of thing or only doing a specific type of gameplay mode, we can have user conditions set up to either hide certain things from them or leverage, if we are going to pop something up to say like, hey, would you like to buy this either with in-game currency or with hard currency, we tailor it more towards what they're doing, more towards the experience that they want, as opposed to just saying everyone in the game gets the same offer and it pops up 3 times a day for 10 days and then it goes away. Because then, yeah, you end up pissing off a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant reaction to the game self-configuring.
Yeah, I think while it's not easy, it would be ideal to have a extremely customized experience for every user, but that's obviously a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mainly been talking about the mobile free-to-play.
Yes.
Market. I was wondering what your thoughts are on like free-to-play moving over to console.
Sure.
Side of things. Like, do you foresee like
Mhm.
When that inevitable shift comes, do you think they're gonna basically restart like your phase one, or a lot of the lessons that they've learned from mobile, the players already expect that,
Yeah.
and the console kind of have to jump straight into phase two or phase three or whatever it's at when it finally kicks in?
I think, well, I hope it doesn't reset. But I think that in a lot of ways, early on in, like, the reason why there was such a harsh reset for mobile and for social and web was you had a lot of these users that were coming in that weren't gamers. People that came in to play Candy Crush or came in to play Farmville or even some of our games that were seen as a little more hardcore than like a puzzle game. These weren't people that were playing World of Warcraft. These weren't people that were playing League of Legends or Dota or any of the MMOs that converted from subscription to free to play. And so these were users that weren't accustomed to seeing the free to play model. Whereas I don't believe there's as harsh of a divide between PC and console. Obviously, you have people that prefer one or the other, but people that play, even if people play exclusively console, they're aware of PC games. So I think you'll get a lot of the learnings from PC free to play or mobile free to play that'll transition into console. Any other questions? Yes.
This kind of builds on his question.
Sure.
I see in the news all the time, AAA, big budget console games that aren't free to play. They cost $60 are beginning to implement microtransactions.
Yep.
People are complaining that it's going to affect the balance and it's going to affect difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
If the developer can always, make this part a bit more challenging and a bit more tedious so that they can get some more money out of you. So do you think that might be the way all games start heading, or
No,
temporary trend? Or?
sure. So I think there's in any model, pay to play, subscription, free to play, there are ways to leverage it in a good way and a bad way. I think you can see, so looking at something like Destiny just recently introduced their microtransactions, and they did it in an effort to stop introducing paid DLC. And they're going to, they were in a lot of ways they were honest in that they said, look, to keep developing the game, we're going to need more revenue. Just buying the box product is not going to be enough to generate the revenue to keep the team going. And so they had been releasing 2 DLCs and then 2 minor DLCs, and then they released a big DLC this past September. And the plan had originally been to do the same strategy for year 2, but instead they went the route of free to play, and they're leveraging things that don't affect the balance of the game, things that affect just vanity, emotes, skins for vehicles, and their hope is that that would generate enough revenue to keep the game going. And so I think if you are going to introduce ways to spend money to either to buy power or to decrease the amount of time you need to spend in the game, you have to be very careful with it, because it is really easy you shouldn't make the free experience worse just to generate additional revenue. Our game, like Star Wars, for example, it's not that like, oh, if we took free to play away, there's suddenly a whole amount of grinding that we would take out because we put it in so that people would want to spend money. There is just, in that our game is an MMO, there is an amount of gameplay that you need to progress through to keep going through the game. Various things you're going to have to earn materials, earn currencies, like any MMORPG. And I think we want to make sure that it's not that, oh, you spend $1 and that saves you 30 hours of grinding, because that's not something we want to do. But yeah, I think the recent example was it Payday 2 introduced microtransactions. There was a pretty strong backlash against that. And so I think you have to be for games that are trying to change business models, I think you have to be very careful how you do it, because double dipping or triple dipping in multiple business models, at least I don't personally think it's a good idea. Free to play has its there are ways to spend money in the game in free-to-play specifically because there's not a price point up front. And so if you put a price point on it and you put microtransactions in it that you can spend money on, you're going to have a lot of people that are really, really pissed off. And in a lot of ways, you're not making use of the great aspects of free-to-play in that by not having a price point up front, you can get 50x, 100x the number of users in the door to try the game. And maybe if you'd even put a price tag of like $1.99 on it, those are users that wouldn't be playing the game otherwise. And so I think you're getting a lot of the negative aspects of free-to-play necessary without the great things that come with it. Yes?
So I know nobody can predict the future, but what would you imagine mobile gaming is going to look like 5 years from now?
Well, I have a hope for what it would be. At this point, phones and tablets are just as strong, or in a lot of cases stronger than certain laptops, certain PCs. I would love to get to a point where, like I said, I think one of the things that we will see is that, and we're slowly getting there, that games are going to be, especially for mobile, are going to be good games that people enjoy, not, oh, it's a good game for a time waster, or oh, it's a good game for mobile or for free to play. That it's genuinely a product that people really enjoy. And what I'd love to see is a truly connected product. I play tons of mobile games when I'm on the train, when I'm when I'm not at home. When I'm at home, I'm playing on my computer, on my console. Sometimes when I'm watching TV, I'll play mobile games as well. I would love to see in the next few years games that have a truly connected experience. Like Hearthstone is one of those examples in that I can play Hearthstone at home on my PC, on my big monitor. It's a great experience. I can play it on my tablet. I can play it on my phone. I'd love to see more of that because as these games get more connected and they add sort of these additional social layers and the additional gameplay depth of like true MMOs, I'd love for a game that I could always be connected to. I think you sort of saw it a little bit with in the console space with with Sony. They sort of had the PS4 and Vita, kind of the remote connection. So, oh, if you want to play a PS4 game on the go, you can. And I think I would love for that to be the way mobile gaming goes, to where it's a great experience on maybe console or PC, and then when I leave the house, I've got it on my phone, I've got it on my tablet, and I can keep playing. And I think I don't know if phones are going to get any larger. It's hard for a phone to get much larger, but you certainly have the screen real estate now to do things that you couldn't do 2 years ago, and have these experiences and this rich, deep 3D gameplay that you couldn't have before. And I think that'll only continue to get better. And if I don't think it'll be in the next 5 years, but maybe in the next 10 years, if VR really takes off. This month we have the Samsung Gear, which is the mobile VR. We'll see how that does. That could be a route, but like I said, I don't think that'll be in the next 5 years. I think that'll be slow to really take off. But that could also be a route that things go. Everyone's sitting on the bus with goggles on, just kind of looking around. Yes.
You touched on the power in mobile phones.
Yes.
And mobile devices are increasing. I think at this point, like personal opinion from my own experiences with mobile games, that the big barrier at this point that's stopping from really exploding is the interface.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't do console games on a phone.
Nope.
Like, you can't do like even hard depth in a game because you only have touch interface. Do you think that barrier is going to be crossed through like peripherals? Are we going to figure out some sort of way of using the touch device? Like, in your experience, what would you say
Sure.
the next growth in that area is?
So I think there's a couple things. And I think early on, the reason why some companies stumbled when jumping into mobile was because they're like, all right, how do we take a console experience and put it on the phone? How do we convert that? Oh, you just slap virtual controls on it and everyone's going to love it. And I personally believe there are going to be some genres of games that never make their way into mobile. If anyone played StarCraft 64, you could understand that not every game should be a console game. I don't believe every game should be a mobile game either. And I think there could be routes where there are companies now that do have peripheral devices that can attach to your device to add controllers. And I think there will be some of that, but I think the games that are going to be best are the ones that that really make use of touch. I mean, there's plenty of interesting things that you can do with touch controls, and even in the newest devices, with the newest iPhone 6s, they even have pressure sensitivity. So a light tap versus a hard press can do different things. And what we found with Star Wars, and it's certainly not perfect by any means, was we opted early on not to do virtual controls. Our game is sort of a top-down, very, very, very light Diablo-style kind of action RPG, and we've made use of touch controls that felt intuitive. So if you want to roll, you can double tap. If you want to swap out a roll with a grenade, then your double tap becomes a grenade, or you can just double tap or two-finger tap on enemies, and it made the game feel like it wasn't just kind of ported over from console. But there are people that did want to play the game with virtual controls. So I think unless there's a peripheral device that comes out that adds almost no bulk to your phone, I'm not sure how well something like that's going to take off, because there are other tablets and things like that that would let you Bluetooth connect to your tablet. But at that point, you're not playing it on the bus, you're playing it at home. And if you're playing a tablet game at home with a controller, I think a lot of people would rather just play a PC game or console game at home with a controller. And so I think developers are going to need to lean into the genres that can best make use of the touch experience. When you look at the thing that I would love to see, and who knows, maybe I'll work on a project like this in the future, I would love to see Tactics take off on mobile. You play Final Fantasy Tactics, or you play Tactics Ogre on Game Boy or anything like that, and the stupid game has you play with a cursor. It's perfect for the touch experience. You tap on a unit, tell them where to go, and it wouldn't feel like a cheapened experience on mobile with a touch interface. And so I think there are genres that people can lean into. It's approaching it from the mindset of not how do I port this experience to this platform. It's what is the experience that would work best on a mobile platform.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Final questions? I'll be at one. Okay. So a question that I definitely always like to try to ask people about is with regards to career. And often we get a lot of speakers that talk about getting into the industry.
Yeah.
Bias, spends a lot of time on that. But I think it's also important to think about looking at where your career is going. Do you have any advice with regards to career advancement? What kind of things one can do to help climb in a company, but also grow as a developer and as a person in a company?
Sure. I think one of the things that gets said a lot without truly understanding the depth with which it can be valuable is playing everything. So to be perfectly honest, I think one of the reasons why I have excelled at Kabam and at other companies is that I play everything. So just because we're a mobile free-to-play company doesn't mean there aren't things from console games or PC games that you can learn. And I think the understanding that there's always something to learn from other games and treating it like, sure, there are games I love playing. I probably play Destiny 30 hours a week, but I play everything under the sun. I play puzzle games, I play casual games, I play anything, because what we found is some of the best ideas, you don't always have to come up with the most original, ingenious idea for a game, but there are often times where things that we've employed on our games have come from something that feel nothing like the games that we have. And so I think just the more knowledgeable you are, the more valuable you'll be to any company. And I think in a lot of ways that's really helped me succeed.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Okay, we'll make that a final question.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how you feel about like company acquisitions by other companies and kind of the way that things kind of merge and get bigger and bigger. For instance, Riot and Epic Games are both partially or mostly owned by Tencent.
Yep.
China. And I grew up just reading the wiki here. Alibaba.
Yes.
Invested $120 million in Kabam. How does that is that like a partnership, or does that affect anything in the way that companies run, like
Yeah.
in the way that you make the games? Because I know that, for instance, Riot's doing pretty well.
Yep.
And I think Tencent like owns 90% of Riot basically right now. But I'm not really sure if that influences in anything in the way they make their games. But if they were to ask
So I think there's probably an infinite number of answers to this question because it ultimately depends on whether it is buying shares in a company, investing in a company, acquiring a company. And I think we've seen cases where an acquisition can end up tanking a company. And I think in the case of Alibaba with Kabam, or at least externally looking at Tencent with Riot, Riot was extremely successful before the investment from Tencent. And I think in a lot of ways, Tencent realized, look, these guys know what they're doing. We want to help them do what they're doing, but just let them expand, let them grow, really let them see their full potential. And anyone I know that I've talked to that works at Riot, it doesn't seem like Tencent has a big influence in their day-to-day. However, to be really successful in this day and age, it requires a truly worldwide presence. And so for like something like us with Alibaba, it's great to have a partner overseas because what is popular and successful in the US, in Europe, is not necessarily the case in Asia. And that's one of the ways where we can get a lot of benefit from either an investment or an acquisition is by gaining a partner in a territory that we're not as familiar with. And so I think you saw that with Riot, League of Legends. Everything League of Legends, I believe, goes through Tencent for Asia. And Tencent obviously is a huge company in Asia, so it helps to have basically a Google-sized company in Asia supporting your product. I think that's the best case scenario, is that Alibaba has not really influenced the way I've run my team, the way anyone at Kabam runs their teams, or does anything day to day. But they've helped us make connections with other companies in other countries that we maybe just didn't even know to reach out to because of the fact that we're not as familiar with partners in that area.
Well, let's give Brian a hand for doing this.